Hello and welcome to a New Pace podcast. I'm your host, Leslie Andrew, and a New Pace podcast is all about taking time to pause, act, create, and empower and step into your new pace, especially at times of challenge and change. The idea of a new pace is that we strike the balance of acceptance and change. Acceptance and change can sit alongside each other. We can really spend time to really pause and reflect and accept our current situation whilst also taking actions, however big or small, towards creating a life that we want, towards creating a new meaning of our experiences, and making choices that feel empowering, developing a life that feels aligned to our preferences, our choices, and that we can really enjoy. So sometimes the idea of acceptance and change can feel really strange for people. How can we have two things going on at the same time? But actually, this is what feels really important to me and something that I've learnt so much about and developed a lot of wisdom about over the years as a therapist. So when I think about acceptance, I think about maybe some of the challenges that I'm experiencing, some of the maybe doubts and frustrations and resistances and like hits to confidence that I'm experiencing, as well as some of the times when I've been courageous, times when I've taken time to act and do something out my comfort zone. And this is why I wanted to frame this episode as acceptance and change coming together as I talk about imposter syndrome. So, imposter syndrome has been talked about a lot by a lot of people who may be in different areas of work, that different things about confidence, your confidence to show up and do a certain thing, the idea of stepping out of your comfort zone and achieving something that somebody then might think, actually, I've got imposter syndrome over that. But what actually really is it? So if you've ever walked into a room or if you've ever started to do something and then thought, I don't feel right here. I feel like an imposter here. I feel like everybody else seems to know exactly what they're doing and I don't have a clue. I don't have confidence in what I'm doing. I'm I'm going to be revealed as a fraud sort of thing. Someone's going to notice that I'm not um the expert like everybody else is. And as I think about imposter syndrome, I think about all of those times when I've shown up to things and I've worked really, really hard for something and I've still kind of thought, well, oh, I was just winging it, or I was just lucky, or that's kind of one of these ideas that somebody would, if you, with imposter syndrome, if you are achieving well, then you might attribute that success to either luck or actually the task was easier than you expected, or an external factor like, well, the other people there didn't know as much, so that's why I won that competition, or the other people helped me along the way. Or if it's a physical race, for instance, you might say, well, you know what, I achieved that marathon and the reason for that is that it was all downhill. That's why. So we'd find a way to minimize the credibility of the success and take away that responsibility from us. However, so that it's actually, well, I achieved that thing. It's not down to me. It wasn't really me. It was an easy thing, or it was just down to luck. However, on the flip side, imposter syndrome causes people to overly attribute failures to themselves. So if they don't achieve the thing, then it might be, well, I didn't work hard enough, or I wasn't cut out for it, rather than saying, actually, that was a particularly hilly course. It makes sense for you to have had to walk some of it, or it makes sense for you to stop halfway and have to finish and not complete the race, or it makes sense if your grade wasn't as high as you wanted, if you failed that exam, it makes sense because it was particularly hard, challenging exam. So the part in the middle where I suppose where growth mindset comes in is having that understanding that there's effort that goes into it, and you are responsible for your successes and your fails. And there's so much nuance with this, and there's so much nuance with this that, and there's so many layers with this, that this pure conversation about it leaves me feeling a bit dissatisfied sometimes. So there's times when I have for sure said, oh, I'm just winging it. I'm just winging it. I've even told people that I've worked with, oh yeah, I don't know what I'm doing, I'm just winging it. And actually what's actually happened is that instead of me explaining my process, explaining the fact that I've got years of experience and understand that there's a need to reflect in the session, in the moment, in the middle of the workshop, in the middle of the therapy session, in the middle of the lesson. Like when I was a teacher, there's a need to be planning as you go along. Because I found that hard to explain, I would sort of go, yeah, I'm just winging it. And actually my brain probably learned that I was just winging it. I was probably programming my brain to be just winging it. So after years of saying I'm just winging it, instead of pinpointing exactly what the recipe was, exactly what I did do to achieve that successful session, or that that flowing workshop, shall we say, and or that conversation and that report, whatever it was that I was doing, because I may have been resistant to explain, sort of thing, or didn't really have the words to explain, I would then be training my brain to think that you're winging it. And actually what then can happen is that we go, oh, I'm just winging it, I'm just winging it. It becomes a thing. And then when there needs to be an explanation and something where maybe showing up in an interview, for instance, and you're asked questions about how you do what you do, and then our nervous system then suddenly freezes and sort of goes, well, I don't really know. And there's an intuitive answer to it, but the question is asking for more certainty. And that's where actually these things can kind of like escalate, I guess. And as we get older, we can start to kind of go, actually, I know less now than I used to do. Now, as I was reflecting on this and working out some things to be talking about in this episode, I was thinking about the frameworks. These are sort of coaching frameworks, I believe, or from somewhere, of how capable somebody is and knowledge. So we've got, when we first learn something, we've got this sense of being incompetent and being consciously incompetent. Oh, there's consciously incompetent. But then when we're consciously incompetent, we know that we're starting a new thing. We do not know anything about that at all. We know that we know nothing. We're literally starting from scratch. And we may know the name of the thing, of the subject, that's it. And then after a short amount of time, we can learn a lot in a short amount of time. Like the archery instructor back in 2019 that said to me about learning archery, a minute to learn, a lifetime to master. And that stuck with me so much. I love that kind of phrase, because it does just show that we learn so much really, really quickly. And we think, oh yeah, could get the hang of this. I like being the beginner. I did a beginner's lesson of breakdancing once and I loved it. I'm like ready to sign up more. I was absolutely terrible, but part of me thought, I'm learning something here. I know it. I have some knowledge. So that's when, in actual fact, we think that we have some competence, but we're unconsciously incompetent because we simply don't know what we don't know. There's so much beyond our realm of experience, so much underneath the iceberg that we've not even heard of, that is just far too complex to even go there. Much like somebody doing a first aid course and then not knowing what they wouldn't know the same sort. They'd know a lot about first aid, but or somebody doing a GCSE science compared to a doctor or a surgeon, for instance. You wouldn't know what they know. So you'd be unconsciously incompetent. And then as we go through this, we get into this realm of being consciously competent. And we're starting to kind of go, right, I know what I'm doing here. I'm having to have I've got an awareness of the information and the knowledge and how I'm actually going about this. I've got some systems in place. However, that it's a conscious thing. It needs to be kind of working on it. And then on the other side of this, we've got unconsciously competent, where someone's just naturally doing the work. They show up without it seemingly without any effort, and like riffing on things, exploring topics, making links to different topics. And actually they would, where I would say this sort of imposter syndrome comes in, is that there'll be a lot of people who are unconsciously competent who actually think that they're consciously incompetent. They believe they are aware of how much they don't know. And I mean, realistically, I have this thing where I heard this somewhere and it really resonated with me. We don't live long enough to ever really become an expert. But then on the flip side of that, like more recently, I've heard, if you know more than most people, if you're like a little bit of a step ahead of other people, then you're an expert. And yeah, that I find that really hard to sit with, because that's where maybe my imposter syndrome comes in, or whether it's imposter syndrome or whether it's maybe just a resistance to being an expert and not necessarily wanting to show myself as an expert. And yeah, there might be different things going on with that. And I don't know if anyone, as you're listening, whether any of this resonates with you, but that idea of kind of going, is that person an expert? Can I trust them? If I showed all of my skills when actually there's things I don't know, would people trust me? And this kind of idea of this second guessing thing, I would say is probably more of an imposter thing than what knowledge we have, how capable we actually are. So that query about how people might see us. And it's so interesting, isn't it? Because actually, on one hand, bouncing back to the acceptance and change, it's really important how other people might see us. We're hardwired for connection. And, you know, when we were little, we'd really crave that connection and that curiosity from our parents. We're telling them something and we want them to be curious about what we're sharing with them. But then at the same time, we want them to be able to sort of go, yeah, you know what, I can validate what you know, you're correct, sort of thing. But yeah, it gets complicated, because when I learn to be a therapist, very different to being an art teacher. So as an art teacher, the information that we relay to our students. So we say, here's the facts, here's the information about how to do a certain art technique, or some information about an artist that we've discovered, and encourage the students to do their own research, to reflect and explore those artists and find different artists that they can be influenced by, that they really like, that kind of they can feel resonate with their artwork, that can really inspire their style. And then we could teach a particular technique and then send them off to explore these different things. Whereas as an art therapist, the stance is very different. There isn't so much the I'm the tutor and I'm going to teach you the skills, or whether that's an art technique, but it's more about being curious and providing art materials to say, I wonder what you're drawn towards. Maybe you could experiment. What sort of things might you be wanting to experiment with? Those questions, and that bringing about that curiosity and that empathy to allow people to learn and grow themselves, to develop their own insights, much like a child, instead of a parent just telling their 5-year-old child that they already know how the brain works, and that's not helpful for that child. It's not helpful for the adult either, but it can create a real disconnect. So because I was a teacher and then moved into being a therapist, I was needing to let go of the knowledge, let go of the preconceived ideas of what good art was, because we'd done all the assessments, we'd had grading of GCSEs and A levels and done all the moderation, so we had certain criteria to achieve success, inverted commas, or to not achieve that. And I had to let go of the idea of something being good art and really lean into what it is that my clients are expressing and what it is that they're communicating, and they can explain that in any way that they want, through words, through images, through objects, however they like. And so then now coming into the online space and learning about business, and particularly now with AI, feels that's been a definite impact. There's a lot of pressure, or a lot of conversations about showing expertise, showing up online and showing that you're an authority in your field, showing that you have expertise, and showing that you can help people. Like sometimes showing, not telling, I think it like resonates better. And on the back of that, part of me recoils into like my shell of kind of going, oh, actually, part of me feels a bit of an imposter, because part of me feels like, well, I can't remember my skills. I've got massive brain fog and I can't remember half these skills because they're all dug deep underneath this iceberg. And actually, yeah, it can feel like genuinely, where is my expert? Where is the expertise? However, because I've been working for years in different psychological settings and needing to hold a position of not knowing, and needing to take that place, not necessarily sitting on the fence, but moving between two of the fields, integrating the two ideas, these ideas of acceptance and change, this idea of gratitude and disappointment sitting at the same time, this idea of knowing and not knowing. Because I've been so supported and trained and spent so long working in this way, and this is how I would be, what I really enjoy working as a therapist and as a coach as well, like integrating bits of therapy and coach together feels good for me, depending on what people want. But because of that, I'm really aware of how I show up online. And there's part of me that kind of goes, you know what, I don't want to be an expert, don't want to show myself as an expert. So then ding dong, here comes the self-sabotage to go, don't want to be that. And it feels a bit of an odd thing to talk through independently as a solo episode rather than have a conversation with somebody about this, because I'm interested to hear everyone's viewpoints on this, because I think that that's what goes on for me, that wanting to demonstrate that place of not knowing whilst also demonstrate a capacity to hold space. But then I've got pressure to, I'm feeling the pressure of this. And I think teacher, art therapist, online world kind of we've got this pendulum of expertise. So I'm feeling that pressure. And I wonder if anyone else is feeling that. And I wonder whether they're feeling that more because of AI, because with artificial intelligence, with all these large language models, ChatGPT and Claude and stuff like that, whether people don't value the knowledge so much, so that they might value people's presence and their characteristics, their expertise, who they are, rather than what they know. However, I don't know whether I'm feeling that stronger than other people might have done, because I've gone through this whole wave of needing to be the expert and then not needing to be the expert, and then kind of going, you need to show your expertise. So this is just, it's become more of a reflection now. I want to bring it back to imposter syndrome and how you can maybe step through some of those things, even if you're feeling imposter syndrome, even if you're not sure whether it's possible to do things. And if I were to come up with some tips for that, my first one would be to just really figure out what it is that you are intending to do in the moment. Are you doing something and what the need is? Are you wanting to achieve the thing because you want to achieve that goal in its own right? Because in that as a standalone thing, if you're enjoying achieving the thing, that external motivation, is it because you're enjoying the social part of it, or is it more that actually you're wanting to prove to your nervous system that you could do a hard thing? So, and then it's like thinking about, actually, what's the smallest thing I could feel that I could achieve from this? How might I feel having achieved that? How might I know that it's me that's overcome that obstacle, rather than, and how might I optimize my own feelings around it, rather than minimizing how hard I worked or minimizing how hard the actual thing was. So there's a bit of a thing with that, and just really starting small and really like being able to maybe use your judgment to let go of expectations of other people. So if you are kind of seeing someone who appears to have all their ducks in a row, then they may have spent hours and hours and hours perfecting and working out exactly what they're going to say. They may be spending hours and hours and hours training, and it would be unfair to disregard how hard they're working. But equally, they may be scared stiff, they may be literally showing everything that they know, or they may be one step ahead of you, or they may be 10,000 steps. Nobody ever knows. But I'm just noticing like a little grey hair on the camera. Can you notice that? Oh, look at that. Oh, look at that. Oh, that's a proper distraction there. But yeah, so anyway, hope that helped in some way, hopefully made sense. But this is the whole thing, that we get it's so easy to get caught up in an expectation as to what something might mean, and for somebody to make an assumption about you, oh, you've got imposter syndrome, this is how you do it, when actually what it might be is like just being resistant to something, resistant to showing your expertise when you maybe want to just relax. You maybe want to, might be that you're feeling burnt out and you've been working so hard because of your skills and because of your expertise. Sometimes you just want to sit back and let somebody else do it. And one thing that I speak about a lot is the fact that just because you can doesn't mean that you have to. So thank you for listening and see you all soon. Bye bye.